going on, everyone? Welcome into the Training Camp 2023 edition of the 415ers podcast, brought to you by the Odyssey Sports Podcast Network with 95.7 The Game. That's Marc Grandi. I'm Evan Giddings. Check us out by downloading the Odyssey app. Check us out on YouTube on 95.7 The Game YouTube channel. Subscribe and like both while you are there. Mark, it's finally here. The 49ers are about to report, well, they have reported, if you're listening to this on Tuesday, we're recording this on Monday. They are reporting to NFL training camp. The veterans are on their way to Santa Clara. They're about to hit the field, and it's go time, man. What's going on? How you feeling?
I'm excited. Yeah, I'm doing great. Looking forward to some fresh content that'll be poured out. We finally are going to have a lot of not only comments from Kyle Shanahan and players and John Lynch. I know they're both speaking tomorrow as we're recording this Tuesday, today, to most of you listening to this. So looking forward to that, but then also just being able to react to live action reps. Again, I know you kind of did that a little bit at OTAs, but it's nowhere near the same, of course, in training camp. So I'm just fired up to finally be at this point of the calendar where you have stars, showing up to camp and you actually can react to things, because the 49ers have a lot of things set in stone. I know we'll get into it throughout this episode and the rest of training camp and preseason, Evan. But there's still a lot on the line and a lot of positions to be decided. So while they have a lot of their starters set, I mean, there's a reason why there's 53-man rosters. Every spot is really, really important, and I'm excited to see how it all shakes out, because one surprise here, one miss there, that could be the difference in this team winning a Super Bowl or not. It really could.
Yeah, it could be an elbow ligament. You never know. Look, we're going to get into the position battles. We're going to get into some of the non-quarterback aspects of this football team that, of course, are very important. But the first question we have for the episode is pretty loaded, Mark. And that is, what is the biggest question heading into 49ers training camp? I'll let you answer this one, even though I got an idea about where you might be going.
Well, I think the obvious one to me is, when do you see Brock Purdy? This is kind of an interesting one, because I think most people I've expected this, that the 49ers would put him on the PUP list, the physically unable to perform list. Not a bad thing. There's two separate PUP lists. There's one for training camp and one for the actual season. If you're placed on PUP during the actual season, you're required to miss at least 4 games, I think is the number. That's not what this preseason training camp PUP list is. It just means that, he's not counting against the guys that you can have in camp. So that's the general expectation. And who knows, by the time that you out there are listening to this, perhaps Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have spoke and have said he is going on PUP. But the fact that they haven't said anything about it yet, we don't know for sure if he is going to go on PUP, Evan. It at least maybe leaves a chance that you could see Brock Purdy this week. The 49ers can put him on PUP to start training camp and then bring him off and do whatever you want there. But once a guy does start practicing, he can't go on that list. On that list. So it's kind of just if you got to be 100% certain of a guy's readiness if you're going to put him out there and practice. So again, with all that said, if he does practice this week, even as soon as tomorrow and Tuesday and Wednesday, the 49ers have to be extremely confident in Brock Purdy's readiness physically to do so. So what I'm keeping an eye out for is, when do we see Brock Purdy? The question related to that is, does he go on PUP to begin training camp, which we should know relatively soon this week.
Yeah, I think, look, Brock Purdy's recovery timeline, that was one that I had written down. Nick Bosa, when is he going to get his extension?
That's a big one.
Because I think that, look, the number is going to be astronomical. It's going to set records. He's the best defensive player, arguably, in football, currently standing. He's entering his prime. He's going to get more than Aaron Donald per year. But when does he get paid? Because I've seen a bunch of different reports floated out there, Mark. I saw on our very station, Dave Lombardi of The Athletic, talk about how it's going to come down to the deadline and don't expect it anytime soon. And then I was reading in the SF Chronicle today, Eric Branch, their 49ers reporter, quote, figures could be consummated this week. So I don't know exactly when that's going to happen. Now, consummated, is that an agreed upon term? Is that actually in writing? Who knows? But I'm very curious to see what Nick Bosa's extension is and when it comes down. And then my third kind of big question for this training camp, Mark, is what Deebo Samuel is going to look like, because he admittedly came into training camp last year out of shape. He did not have a great season by his own metrics, even though the 49ers were wildly successful with him underperforming. And now with a full training camp, I'm curious to see what he is going to do, because he also wasn't a full participant in their offseason mini camp, and we didn't see him out there a whole lot on OTAs. So from first to third, Brock Purdy's recovery timeline is absolutely one. The quarterback, undoubtedly. The second, when is Nick Bosa going to get his bread? And thirdly, is Deebo Samuel going to be the 2021 version of himself coming into camp, or is he going to be the 2022 version of himself?
Yeah, those are all good. I have those on my list as well. To go after your second one, to add on there a little bit, uh, Nick Bosa's contract extension. You think back to last year, it was the Deebo Samuel contract extension. There was a lot more drama around that one, of course, because he had reportedly requested a trade and all of that drama. I don't need to rehash it. But he eventually agreed to the contract on July 31st, at least according to reports. So I would maybe set the over under, if you would. Does it happen in July or does it happen in early August? That's kind of the cutoff point, and it's where it's kind of been in the past for the 49ers. If it's going to happen, not if, it's going to happen. The question is it going to happen within the first few days of training camp, or will it take a little bit more negotiation? I can 100% promise you that it will happen. It's just a question of exactly when. You're right. That is a question, and it's a big one because he's going to get paid. The question for me, and I think you would agree, and I think you were getting to this, isn't necessarily about when or if it's even going to happen. It's just simply the question, how much freaking money is it going to be? Because it is going to be absolutely massive. He will be the highest paid defensive player in NFL history, at least for a short period of time. The market always resets when you have a generational talent like this become an extension eligible. But that is the only question around the Nick Bosa larger question, Evan, because there's no doubt in my mind that he will sign something soon. It's just a question of how much is he resetting the market by?
Yeah, and look, if we're having to throw a number out there, I think Aaron Donald is the highest paid defensive player at about 30 million per year. I wouldn't be shocked to see Nick Bosa get what is it, 4 years for 100 and if I'm doing the math correctly, 140 million, 35 million per year. To me, I don't
Yeah.
think that's out of bounds. And that might even be, just a contract negotiation of how many years versus the AAV. Whatever they can do to max him out, they're going to. Like Nick
Yes.
Bosa is going to reset records, not only for defensive players, Mark, but I also think we're going to see finally a top notch defensive player be paid like a quarterback. And that has not happened, to my knowledge, all that often in NFL history.
Yeah. No, I mean it's weird. We talked about this a little bit last week in relation to the running backs. I mean, part of the reason why the running backs there isn't a lot of money for them anymore, obviously, is the nature of the position, and teams seem to have found what they feel like is a market inefficiency with some of those less expensive running backs. But you have quarterbacks like Daniel Jones, for example, making $40 million a year, and the Giants are looking at Saquon Barkley like, "Hey, sorry, we can't pay you." Now you have defensive players like Nick Bosa, who's certainly much better at what he does than Daniel Jones is at what he does, but making likely, we still have to await the numbers from Nick Bosa, but likely similar numbers to a quarterback, Daniel Jones, who got to the playoffs last year, and so on and so forth. So you're right. It is interesting how these positions and the money kind of allotted to each of those positions continues to grow. Because I mean, after quarterback, you were to ask anyone with knowledge of how to build a football team, what's like the second most important position in football? You probably would get some people saying defensive back, but I think most people would say a pass rusher. And obviously, that's what Nick Bosa is. Maybe offensive line left tackle would be up there as well. But Nick Bosa is a building block, and people like him, edge rushers, elite edge rushers, even interior defensive linemen who aren't generally the good edge or pass rushers. Those guys are building blocks of rosters, and perhaps only pale to quarterbacks in terms of importance and in your ability to win games.
Well, and if we're talking about the importance on the 49ers roster, he's not a building block. Nick Bosa
He's
is
the
the
yeah,
building block.
yeah.
Like, that's why we're talking about him getting the amount of money that he is duly deserved, because he's coming off a defensive player of the year. He is just entering his prime. He's got a lot of great football left in him. And most importantly, he can impact winning right now. So, yes, quarterback is the most important position in football. The 49ers, and we'll get to it, have not really figured that out yet so far, even though Brock Purdy is expected to be their number one quarterback entering this season. So right now, Nick Bosa is the building block. And look, I mean, we're talking about what positions are important to be paid as far as, general NFL teams. But with the 49ers, look, Nick Bosa is at the top of the list. Trent Williams is obviously up there.
Hmm.
And then, you're looking around at the contracts, Mark, and Deebo Samuel on that near $25 million, number per year is jumping out at you like this guy had better be a building block for the 49ers this season. Not to say that he wasn't last year, but if you're talking about list of importance and the players that kind of keyed the success for the 49ers last season, is Deebo Samuel in your top 5?
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't know.
I'm
I
not saying he
mean,
can't be this season, but last year he was not
yeah,
giving you the production as far as the money is concerned.
probably not. I mean, even if you just look at the offense, I mean, once, post McCaffrey acquisition, McCaffrey was the most important skill position player, bar none, not even a question. George Kittle had a fantastic end to the regular season, and it kind of coincided with Brock Purdy's rise. Was George Kittle having a great season? Brandon Ayuk was the team's leading receiver really all year long. That didn't really change towards the end of the regular season either. And I mean, you could always throw Trent Williams in there, despite the fact that the line was a little more experienced last year than it will be this coming year. But Trent Williams, maybe the best pure football player in the entire league, despite at his advanced age for an elite offensive lineman. I'm 100% with you. I don't think you can call Deebo Samuel one of the team's 5 most important players last year. It's even debatable that he's one of the 5 most important offensive players last year. So I am also keeping an eye on Deebo Samuel, and it's something I want to get into a little bit in our next segment when it comes to position battles, because I think there's something really interesting brewing in the wide receiver room. But you're 100% right. Deebo Samuel with his offseason workouts, which he didn't have any of last year. Remember when he spoke earlier in the offseason, I think at OTAs, at the 49ers facility, saying things along the lines of, well, there was, all that drama and distraction last off season. I didn't really have the ability to come in and get my work in. And I felt like I was a little behind the 8 ball. I'm paraphrasing here, obviously, but that hasn't really been the case this off season. I don't know if you've seen him. I've certainly seen a lot of, his workout videos on Instagram. They get all the 49er fans fired up. You've seen a lot of those over the last month and a half or so from Deebo Samuel. So does that translate? Does he look more like the 2021 Deebo as opposed to the 2022 Deebo? I don't know. But if he does, this 49er offense might reach a different level.